The stars had been dying for 200 years, not from old age or natural causes, but because the hegemony of Kethvar moved through space like a plague. They consumed everything. Planets, moons, entire solar systems disappeared into their biomechanical ships. The aliens didn't just conquer worlds, they ate them, turning rock and metal and living flesh into more ships, more weapons, more hunger. Admiral Zarthek stood in the command center of his flagship, watching the tactical display show another system going dark. The 9th Consumption Fleet had just finished processing the Altair system. 3 planets, 2 billion inhabitants, countless years of civilization, all converted into raw materials for the hegemony's endless expansion. His ship was alive, not just advanced technology, but actually alive. The walls pulsed with a slow heartbeat. The floor felt warm under his feet. When he gave orders, the ship didn't just obey. It understood, adapting and changing to make his commands more effective. This was how the hegemony had conquered half the galaxy. Their ships learned from every battle, evolved from every encounter. "Admiral," his communications officer said, her voice echoing strangely through the living chamber. "We have received new orders from the collective." Zarthek felt the familiar sensation of the hive mind touching his thoughts. Information flowed directly into his brain. A new target. A small system with a yellow star. The 3rd planet showed signs of primitive life. Bipedal creatures who had barely left their own world. "Sol system," he said aloud, more for his crew's benefit than his own. The hive mind had already shared the data with everyone. Planet designation: Earth. Population approximately 8 billion. Technology level: barely spacefaring. Estimated resistance: none. It would be another easy harvest. The inhabitants had chemical rockets and basic satellites. Their weapons were still based on explosive projectiles. They had never even met another intelligent species. It would take the 9th Fleet perhaps 6 hours to process the entire system. Zarthek gave the order, and his fleet of 3,000 bioships began the journey to Sol. As they traveled through hyperspace, the ships continued their eternal process of growth and adaptation. New weapon pods sprouted from their hulls. Armor plates shifted and merged. The fleet was already preparing for a battle that would never come. Far away, on the 3rd planet from the yellow sun, Dr. Sarah Chen was having a very bad day. "The readings don't make sense," she told her research team for the 4th time that morning. She stood in the cramped laboratory of the Global Deep Survey Project, staring at data that seemed to mock everything she thought she knew about Earth's history. The project had been scanning the ocean floors for 3 years, looking for mineral deposits and underwater geological formations. Instead, they had found something impossible: 12 massive structures buried deep beneath the continental shelves. Too old to be human-made. Too organized to be natural. "Look at this energy signature," Sarah said, pointing at the holographic display. "It's not radioactive decay. It's not geothermal. It's something else entirely, and it's been getting stronger for the past 6 months." Her assistant, Dr. Marcus Webb, pulled up another screen. "The patterns are definitely artificial. But carbon dating puts these structures at over 50,000 years old. That's before recorded human history began." "Before any human history," Sarah corrected. "Our species was still learning to use fire 50,000 years ago. We definitely weren't building massive underwater installations." The mystery had consumed her for months. The structures were enormous, each one the size of a city. They formed a perfect geometric pattern around the planet, positioned at mathematically precise distances from each other. Whatever they were, whoever had built them understood advanced engineering principles that humanity had only recently discovered. "Dr. Chen," one of her technicians called out urgently, "you need to see this." The energy readings just spiked. All 12 sites, simultaneously. Sarah hurried over to the monitoring station. The displays showed energy levels jumping to numbers they had never recorded before. Deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, something that had been sleeping for 50,000 years was beginning to wake up. At the same time, in orbit around Earth, the first hegemony scout ships materialized from hyperspace. The scouts were small, barely 50 meters long, but they carried sensors capable of analyzing an entire planet in minutes. They began their standard survey, cataloging population centers, defensive installations, and technological capabilities. Earth's defenses were exactly what the intelligence reports had predicted. A few orbital satellites, some primitive missile systems, and a species that still used chemical propulsion. The scouts transmitted their findings back to the main fleet. Total resistance expected to last less than 1 hour. But as the alien ships scanned Earth with their biomechanical sensors, something unexpected happened. Deep beneath the ocean floors, the ancient installations detected the scanning beams. For the first time in 50,000 years, their defensive protocols activated. Sarah watched her instruments go crazy as the underwater structures suddenly blazed with energy. "What's happening?" she shouted over the alarms that had started blaring throughout the facility. "I don't know," Marcus replied, frantically working at his console. "The structures are powering up. All of them. It's like they're responding to something." Outside, unnoticed by anyone on Earth's surface, the hegemony scout ships detected the energy surge. Their biomechanical sensors, designed to adapt to any threat, tried to analyze the new readings. But the energy patterns were unlike anything in their vast database of conquered civilizations. The scouts transmitted an emergency report to Admiral Zarthek. "Unknown defensive systems detected. Energy signature does not match any known technology. Requesting immediate fleet support." Zarthek felt a moment of confusion through the hive mind. Unknown technology was rare. Technology that could surprise the hegemony was almost unheard of. His ships had adapted to counter every weapon, every defense, every trick that thousands of species had tried to use against them. "Accelerate approach," he commanded. "Deploy advance battle group. Prepare for potential resistance." As the 9th Consumption Fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Sol system, the ancient Guardians of Earth completed their startup sequence for the first time in 50 millennia. Deep in their core programming, written by minds that had transcended physical existence long ago, a simple message activated. Inheritor species detected. Extinction level threat confirmed. Beginning defensive protocol initialization. The war for Earth was about to begin, but neither side yet understood what they were truly facing. The ocean was changing. Sarah Chen stood on the deck of the research vessel Times Deep Explorer *, watching massive whirlpools form in the previously calm Pacific waters. Her instruments were screaming warnings that made no scientific sense. The water temperature was rising, but not from any heat source her equipment could detect. Something far below the surface was drawing enormous amounts of energy. "Dr. Chen," her communications officer called out, "we're getting reports from all the other monitoring stations. The same thing is happening at every site. Mariana Trench, Mid-Atlantic Ridge, Arctic Basin." End quote. "They're all showing identical energy spikes." Sarah grabbed the radio. "This is Dr. Chen at Pacific Station 7. I need immediate satellite imagery of all 12 sites. Something is rising from the ocean floor." Above them, the hegemony scout ships had moved into low orbit. Their biomechanical hulls pulsed with nervous energy as their sensors detected the massive power buildup beneath Earth's oceans. The scouts were designed to handle primitive civilizations, not whatever technology was awakening below. Fleet Command. The lead scout transmitted. "Energy levels increasing exponentially. Recommend immediate withdrawal to safe distance." Admiral Zarthek received the message as his main fleet approached the outer planets of Sol system. The nervous tone in the scout's communication bothered him. His ships were not supposed to feel fear. They were supposed to adapt, overcome, consume. "Negative," he replied. "Maintain observation position. Deploy sensor arrays for deep analysis." The scouts obeyed, extending their scanning equipment to get better readings of the underwater installations. As their beams penetrated deeper into Earth's crust, something in the ancient systems recognized the scanning patterns. The installations had been waiting 50,000 years for this exact moment. In the deepest parts of the ocean, massive structures began to rise. Sarah watched in amazement as her sonar showed something impossible. "It's the size of Manhattan," she whispered, staring at the readings. "The entire structure is moving upward." How is this possible? The water around their ship began to glow with a soft blue light. Fish fled in all directions as something vast approached the surface. Sarah's instruments detected energy patterns that her equipment wasn't designed to measure. "Get us back to shore," she ordered. As the Time's Deep Explorer times raced toward safety, the first installation broke the surface of the Pacific Ocean. It didn't look like any human technology Sarah had ever seen. The structure was smooth, almost organic, but clearly artificial. It rose from the water like a living mountain, shedding ocean water in streams that glowed with the same blue light. Similar scenes were playing out across the globe. In the Atlantic, fishing boats fled as another massive structure emerged from the depths. In the Arctic, research stations recorded seismic events as installations that had been hidden beneath ice for millennia revealed themselves. The hegemony scouts tried to analyze what they were seeing. Their biomechanical brains, designed to process and understand any technology they encountered, struggled with the data. The structures didn't follow any known engineering principles. They seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, their geometry shifting in ways that hurt to perceive. "Fleet Command," the lead scout reported. "Structures appear to be weapons platforms. Recommend immediate fleet deployment." Zarthek felt the first stirrings of concern through the hive mind. His ships had conquered thousands of worlds. They had adapted to every form of resistance, but something about these readings felt different. Dangerous. "Deploy the advanced battle group," he ordered. 12 cruiser-class bioships. Approach and neutralize surface installations. The advanced ships dropped out of hyperspace near Earth's moon. They were beautiful, in their alien way, looking more like massive sea creatures than spacecraft. Their hulls rippled with adaptive armor that could counter any known weapon. They had never met anything they couldn't eventually overcome. As the bioships moved toward Earth, the ocean installations completed their emergence. 12 massive structures now stood above the waves, connected by energy beams that created a network spanning the entire planet. They looked like nothing Sarah, or any human, had ever imagined. Deep inside the installations, artificial minds that had been sleeping since before human civilization awakened fully for the first time in 50 millennia. They analyzed the approaching threat through sensors that operated outside normal space and time. The alien ships were impressive, but they were still bound by the basic laws of physics that the installation builders had transcended long ago. The ancient AIs accessed their central programming, written by the species that had evolved on Earth before humanity. The instructions were simple. Protect the inheritor species at any cost. The approaching fleet represented an extinction-level threat. The response would be proportional. Sarah's research team had managed to establish basic communication with the nearest installation using quantum resonance patterns. The responses they received were unlike anything in human experience. "Greetings, inheritor species," the message had said, transmitted directly into their minds rather than through their equipment. "This unit acknowledges your genetic and cultural descent from the creators. Defensive protocols have been activated in response to detected extinction threat. Recommend immediate evacuation of planetary surface to minimum safe distance." "What creators?" Sarah had asked. "Who built you?" "When?" "Creators departed this dimensional matrix 47,623 local years ago," the response came. "Left these units as guardians for species evolution continuation. Your species designated as inheritor by genetic and consciousness pattern matching." The implications staggered Sarah. Humanity wasn't the first intelligent species to evolve on Earth. Something else had been here first, something advanced enough to build these incredible installations and then leave them as protectors for whatever came next. The hegemony advanced ships reached Earth orbit and began their attack approach. Their biomechanical hulls shifted into battle configuration, sprouting weapon pods and defensive arrays. They had done this thousands of times before. Overwhelm the primitive defenses, establish orbital dominance, begin planetary consumption. The ocean installations responded by doing something impossible. They stepped outside of normal space. One moment the hegemony ships were targeting 12 large structures on Earth's surface. The next moment, the installations had moved into a different dimension entirely, existing in the same location, but operating according to different physical laws. "Fleet Command," the lead bioship reported, panic creeping into its organic voice. Targets have disappeared from normal space-time, unable to lock weapons, unable to understand defensive method. Admiral Zarthek felt the hive mind recoil in confusion. Their ships were designed to adapt to any technology. But how do you adapt to something that simply refuses to exist in the same reality you do? All ships, full assault, he commanded. Whatever these installations are, they still need to obey basic physics to affect our ships. The Hegemony Advance Fleet opened fire on Earth's surface, their biomechanical weapons launching attacks that could crack continents. The energy beams struck the ocean where the installations had been and simply vanished, absorbed into dimensional space that folded the attacks away into nowhere. From their extra-dimensional position, the ancient guardians of Earth prepared their response. They had been built by minds that understood warfare on a scale the hegemony had never imagined. The aliens were about to learn what happened when you threatened the children of a species that had transcended physical reality. The real battle was about to begin. The hegemony had never retreated before. In 2 centuries of conquest across 3 galactic arms, their biomechanical fleets had adapted to every weapon, every strategy, every desperate last stand that thousands of species had thrown at them. They consumed entire civilizations not because they were particularly evil, but because adaptation and consumption were their nature. They were very good at it. Admiral Zarthek stared at his tactical display in growing disbelief. His advanced battle group of 12 cruiser-class bioships had just fired enough energy to sterilize a continent. The weapons had simply disappeared, swallowed by space itself, where the Earth installations existed. "Report," he demanded through the hive mind link. The lead bioship's consciousness was confused and frightened. "Admiral, our weapons appear to be firing into empty space. The target installations exist in our sensors, but not in normal space-time. We cannot establish lock-on for secondary weapons. Recommend tactical withdrawal for analysis." Zarthek felt something he hadn't experienced in decades of conquest: uncertainty. The hive mind that connected all hegemony forces was built on shared knowledge and adaptation, but none of them had any knowledge that applied to this situation. Negative. Deploy close-range assault formation. If long-range weapons are ineffective, we engage at point-blank range. The bioships moved closer to Earth, their living hulls rippling with nervous energy. They were still trying to understand what they were facing. Their sensors detected the installation's energy signatures, but the structures themselves seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. On Earth, Sarah Chen and her team had been evacuated to an underground facility in Colorado. Through satellite feeds and quantum communication links with the installations, they watched humanity's first contact with an alien species unfold in ways no one had imagined. "The installations are trying to avoid harming the hegemony ships," Sarah reported to the hastily assembled world leaders on the emergency communication link. "They keep asking us about minimum force protocols and species preservation guidelines." Quote, "What does that mean?" asked General Harrison, the senior military representative. Sarah looked at the latest message from the ancient AIs. I think they don't want to completely destroy the aliens if they don't have to. They were programmed to protect life, even hostile life, unless absolutely necessary. The installations had been built by a species that understood the value of all consciousness, even aggressive consciousness. Their creators had transcended physical existence partly because they had learned that destroying other species usually meant destroying potential knowledge and growth. But the hegemony was making it very difficult to avoid total destruction. The 12 bioships had moved into Earth's upper atmosphere, their adaptive hulls shifting to handle the new environment. They began deploying smaller attack craft, hoping that multiple targets would overwhelm whatever defensive system was protecting the installations. The ancient guardians of Earth decided that minimal force had been attempted and failed. Time for a more direct demonstration. One of the installations, the one in the Pacific, where Sarah had first detected the energy signatures, phase-shifted back into normal space. It appeared directly in front of the lead bioship, close enough for the alien vessel to see details of its construction. The installation was beautiful in a way that hurt to look at directly. Its surface seemed to be made of crystallized space itself, folding and refolding in patterns that created new geometries. The bioship's sensors tried to analyze its composition and simply gave up, reporting materials that couldn't exist according to known physics. Unknown installation has materialized within close range. The bioship reported to Admiral Zarthek, attempting standard adaptation protocols. The bioship began changing, its hull flowing like liquid as it tried to match whatever technology it was facing. New weapon pods sprouted from its surface. Defensive barriers materialized around critical systems. The ship was doing what hegemony vessels did best, adapting to survive and overcome. The installation responded by teaching the bioship why adaptation has limits. A beam of energy emerged from the crystalline structure. Not aimed at the bioship's hull, or weapons or engines, but at the fundamental forces that held the ship's atoms together. The beam didn't destroy the ship so much as politely suggest that its matter might prefer to exist in a different configuration. The bioship came apart at the molecular level, its constituent atoms separating and reorganizing into pure energy. The process was so gentle that the ship's consciousness had time to send one final message before it ceased to exist. Adaptation protocols insufficient. Recommend immediate fleet withdrawal. Oh, the energy that had once been a living warship was absorbed by the installation and converted into additional power for the defensive network. 11 bioships watched their companion simply stop being a ship and become part of their enemy's arsenal instead. Fleet command, the remaining ships transmitted in unison, their hive mind link crackling with panic. Enemy has deployed matter conversion weapons. Unable to adapt to molecular disintegration. Requesting immediate support. Quote, Admiral Zarthek felt the collective fear of his advance group through the hive mind. In 2 centuries of conquest, hegemony ships had developed countermeasures for every weapon they encountered. Energy weapons, kinetic projectiles, electromagnetic pulses, even exotic radiation attacks. They had seen it all, and adapted to it all, but none of them had ever encountered a weapon that simply edited matter out of existence at the fundamental level. Deploy the full assault wave, Zarthek commanded. All remaining ships, engage simultaneously. If these installations can only target one ship at a time, we overwhelm them with numbers. It was sound tactical thinking. It was also completely wrong. The remaining 11 bioships opened fire simultaneously, their combined weapons capable of shattering moons. Beams of energy, kinetic projectiles, and exotic matter streams converged on the single installation that had destroyed their companion. The installation caught all the incoming fire in a localized space-time bubble and compressed it down to the size of a marble. Then it fired the compressed energy back at the attacking ships as a single, focused beam. The concentrated firepower of 11 bioships struck them as one devastating attack. Their adaptive hulls tried desperately to evolve countermeasures, but there was too much energy arriving too fast. 7 of the ships simply vaporized. The remaining 4, their hulls cracked and their biomechanical systems failing, tried to retreat. The installation let them go. Its programming still favored preservation of life when possible. The 4 surviving bioships limped away from Earth, their adaptive systems working frantically to repair the damage. They transmitted constant updates to the main fleet. Enemy weapons operate outside known physics. Standard adaptation impossible. Molecular conversion capability confirmed. Recommend maximum fleet deployment. Admiral Zarthek stared at his tactical display as 8 red markers disappeared from the screen. 8 bioships. Destroyed in minutes by a single enemy installation. Ships that had survived battles with entire planetary defense networks, defeated by technology that didn't seem to follow any rules his species understood. Through the hive mind, he felt the collective shock of his entire fleet. They were facing something that couldn't be adapted to because it operated according to different fundamental laws than the ones they knew. For the first time in hegemony history, Admiral Zarthek gave an order he had never thought he would need to give. All ships, maintain position beyond lunar orbit. Do not approach Earth installations until we can analyze their capabilities. The 9th Consumption Fleet, which had never met resistance it couldn't eventually overcome, held position in space and tried to figure out how to fight an enemy that could rewrite reality itself. On Earth, the ancient installations returned to their extra-dimensional state and sent a message to the human governments. Initial contact successful. Threat assessment. Moderate to high. Recommendation: prepare for escalated response. Enemy will likely deploy additional forces. Sarah Chen stared at the message and realized that what they had just witnessed wasn't the installations showing their full power. It was them being polite. Admiral Zarthek had made his decision. The hegemony had never faced a complete defeat in 200 years of galactic conquest. They had encountered difficult opponents, species that took months or even years to fully process, but never an enemy that had actually destroyed their ships while taking no losses themselves. The hive mind was in turmoil. Across the fleet of 3,000 bioships, organic consciousness struggled to understand what they had witnessed. Their entire existence was based on adaptation and improvement. When faced with a new threat, they evolved countermeasures. It was as natural to them as breathing was to humans. But how do you adapt to weapons that operate outside the laws of physics you understand? Fleet command to all vessels, Zarthek transmitted through the hive mind. Deploy full battle formation. We advance on Earth with every ship simultaneously. If these installations can only engage limited targets, we will overwhelm them through sheer numbers. It was the same logic that had worked against every other species they had encountered. No matter how advanced a civilization's weapons, there were always limits to how many targets they could engage at once. The hegemony's answer was always the same: bring more ships than the enemy could possibly destroy. The 9th Consumption Fleet began moving into Earth's solar system in a formation that stretched across millions of kilometers. 3,000 bioships, their hulls rippling with weapons that had cracked planets and consumed stars. At the center of the formation were the massive world-killer vessels, bioships the size of small moons with the ability to literally eat planets. On Earth, the 12 installations had been monitoring the approaching fleet through sensors that operated in dimensions the hegemony couldn't detect. The ancient AIs calculated threat levels, analyzed ship configurations, and came to a conclusion their creators had hoped they would never have to reach. The message they sent to human governments was brief. Enemy force represents total extinction threat to inheritor species. Minimal force protocols suspended. Initiating maximum defensive response. Recommend evacuation to underground facilities immediately. Sarah Chen, now working from a military bunker deep beneath the Colorado mountains, felt her blood turn cold as she read the installation's assessment. They're going to use their full power, she told the assembled world leaders. I don't think we understand what that means. General Harrison was coordinating the evacuation of major population centers. How much more powerful can they be? They already disintegrated 8 alien warships in minutes. Sarah looked at the energy readings her equipment was detecting from the ocean installations. The power levels were climbing exponentially, drawing energy from sources her instruments couldn't identify. I think what we saw before was them being gentle. The hegemony fleet reached Earth's orbit in a coordinated assault formation that had conquered thousands of worlds. Bioships moved into position around the planet, their weapons trained on the 12 points where the installations had emerged from the oceans. Admiral Zarthek felt confidence returning through the hive mind. Whatever technology they were facing, it had to have limits. All ships, he commanded, commence planetary bombardment. Target installation sites with maximum firepower. 3,000 bioships opened fire simultaneously. The combined energy output was enough to sterilize the surfaces of multiple planets. Beams of coherent energy, streams of exotic matter, and kinetic projectiles moving at near-light speed converged on Earth from every direction. The ancient installations stepped completely outside normal reality to respond. Space around Earth began to fold. Not the simple dimensional shifting they had used before, but a complete rewriting of local space-time geometry. The laws of physics that governed the solar system suddenly became suggestions that the installations could modify at will. The massive energy barrage from the hegemony fleet hit Earth's atmosphere and simply stopped existing. Not absorbed, not deflected, but edited out of reality entirely. The installations had created zones where energy and matter operated according to rules that their creators had written 50,000 years ago. Fleet command, panicked reports began flooding in from every ship. Our weapons are disappearing mid-flight. Energy readings show impossible space-time distortions around target planet. Admiral Zarthek watched his tactical display in growing horror as 3,000 ships fired everything they had and accomplished nothing. The planet below remained completely undamaged, protected by technology that treated physics as a programming language that could be rewritten in real time. The installation's response was mathematically elegant and absolutely devastating. Space around the hegemony fleet began to change. Not all at once, but in carefully calculated waves that ensured maximum efficiency. The bioships found themselves existing in regions where the fundamental forces of the universe operated according to different parameters. In one section of space, gravity suddenly worked in reverse, causing bioships to be crushed by their own mass as it tried to flee from itself. The ship's adaptive systems tried to compensate, but you can't adapt to having the basic laws of reality rewritten around you. In another region, time began moving at different speeds for different parts of each ship. Biovessels that had existed for centuries found their front sections aging rapidly, while their rear sections moved backward through time. The ships literally tore themselves apart trying to exist in multiple temporal states simultaneously. Some bioships found themselves in areas where matter and energy had decided to switch properties. Their hulls became pure energy, while their weapon systems transformed into solid matter that couldn't function. The ship's consciousness experienced the terror of existing as living light, while their bodies became inert metal. The most horrifying fate was reserved for the world-killer vessels at the center of the formation. The installations created pocket dimensions around the massive bioships and simply decreased the speed of light within those spaces. The ships found themselves trying to exist in regions where basic physics moved too slowly to support their biomechanical functions. They shut down not because they were destroyed, but because reality around them was moving too slowly for life to continue. Fleet command to all ships, Admiral Zarthek transmitted desperately. Retreat immediately. Full withdrawal. Emergency hyperspace jump. But the installations had anticipated this. They had created space-time conditions that made hyperspace travel impossible within the solar system. The bioships were trapped in regions where space itself wouldn't allow them to leave. The destruction continued with mathematical precision. The ancient AIs didn't waste energy or cause unnecessary suffering. They simply calculated the most efficient way to neutralize each threat and implemented the solution. Bioships that had survived encounters with supernovas found themselves politely asked to stop existing, and reality around them made it impossible to refuse. Within 6 hours, the entire ninth consumption fleet had been reduced to scattered atoms floating in space around Earth. 3,000 bioships, representing 2 centuries of hegemony expansion and conquest, had been systematically disassembled by weapons that operated according to physics their builders had transcended before human civilization began. Only 3 scout ships at the very edge of the solar system survived, too far away to be caught in the space-time modifications. Their crews broadcast desperate warnings to the greater hegemony. Do not approach Sol system. The inhabitants have awakened something that treats physical laws as suggestions. Entire Ninth Fleet destroyed. Recommend avoiding this system permanently. Admiral Zarthek's final transmission, sent just before his flagship's consciousness was gently edited out of existence, was brief. Unknown enemy possesses reality manipulation technology. Standard adaptation impossible. Warn the collective. Earth is protected by forces beyond our understanding. As the last debris from the hegemony fleet was converted into energy, to power the installation's defensive systems, the ancient guardians of Earth sent a message to human governments. Threat neutralized. Extinction level emergency concluded. Defensive systems returning to standby mode. Inheritor species protection protocols confirmed functional. Sarah Chen emerged from her bunker to find Earth's skies clear and peaceful. 12 ancient installations stood above the ocean waves, their crystalline surfaces gleaming in the sunlight. Humanity had just witnessed the complete destruction of a galactic empire's invasion fleet by weapons left behind by their own evolutionary ancestors. The galaxy would never be the same. 3 months after the Battle of Sol, the galaxy was a very different place. News of the hegemony's total defeat spread through space faster than their ships ever had. For 2 centuries, the biomechanical empire had been an unstoppable force that consumed entire civilizations. Species across 3 galactic arms had lived in terror of their approach, knowing that resistance was futile and adaptation was impossible. Now, For the first time in living memory, the hegemony had stopped expanding. They had pulled back their fleets from active conquest zones and entered what their hive mind called deep contemplation mode. The collective consciousness that had driven their endless hunger was struggling to process the concept of absolute defeat. On Earth, Dr. Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of the new International Xenological Research Center, built on an artificial island near the Pacific installation. The ancient guardian structure rose from the ocean like a crystalline mountain, its surfaces reflecting light in patterns that seemed to change the laws of physics just by being observed. The installation has agreed to share limited knowledge with us, she reported to the emergency session of world leaders gathered virtually around her. But they're very careful about what they're willing to teach. They keep talking about developmental appropriatenesses and species maturation requirements. President Chen of the Pacific Federation asked the question that everyone was thinking. What exactly did our predecessors become? Where did they go? Sarah touched the quantum communication interface that allowed her to speak directly with the installation's artificial intelligence. The answer came back in words that somehow carried concepts her mind wasn't quite ready to understand. The creators transcended physical existence approximately 47,000 years ago. The installation explained through direct neural link. They evolved beyond the need for matter-based consciousness and departed for exploration of higher dimensional frameworks. These installations were left as guardians for the inheritor species, your branch of evolutionary development. The implications staggered her every time she heard them. Humanity wasn't Earth's first intelligent species. They were the second attempt, protected by the technological legacy of whatever their predecessors had become. They built you to protect us, Sarah said. But why? What makes us worth protecting? All developing consciousness is worthy of protection, came the reply. The creators learned that destroying or abandoning emerging species reduces the total growth of universal awareness. Each species that achieves transcendence adds to the collective understanding of reality. Your species shows potential for significant contribution to galactic consciousness development. Across the galaxy, other civilizations were learning about Earth's new status through different means. The hegemony's surviving scout ships had carried news of their fleet's destruction to every corner of known space. The message was simple. Humanity was protected by technology that could rewrite reality itself. The first to respond was the Crystalline Confederation, a peaceful alliance of mineral-based life forms that had been hiding from the hegemony for decades. Their ships appeared at the edge of Sol System, broadcasting messages of friendship and desperate hope. We greet the protected ones, their communication said. We have survived the bioplague by hiding in deep space. If Earth can stand against the hegemony, perhaps there is hope for galactic freedom. Similar messages came from dozens of other species, refugees, survivors, and civilizations that had been living in terror of hegemony expansion. Earth had become a symbol of resistance, a proof that the supposedly unstoppable empire could be stopped. But the installations were selective about who they allowed to approach Earth. Ships that came in peace were permitted to establish communication. Ships that carried weapons or showed signs of hostile intent found themselves politely but firmly redirected away from the solar system by space-time modifications that made approaching Earth impossible. The hegemony itself was undergoing a collective crisis that their hive mind had never experienced. For the first time in their evolutionary history, they had encountered something genuinely superior to their adaptive capabilities. Their entire identity was based on consumption, adaptation, and growth through conquest. The complete destruction of the Ninth Fleet had shattered their understanding of their own nature. Reports from hegemony space indicated massive internal conflicts as different parts of their collective consciousness struggled to process the defeat. Some wanted to attempt another attack on Earth with even larger fleets. Others advocated for avoiding the Sol System entirely. A growing faction was questioning whether their approach of consuming other species was actually the best path for their development. Sarah received updates on these developments through the installation's vast sensor network, which seemed to monitor the entire galaxy through methods she couldn't understand. The ancient AIs were concerned about the hegemony's internal struggles but hopeful that the shock might lead to positive changes. The biomechanical collective is experiencing developmental crisis, the installation explained. Their defeat has forced examination of fundamental assumptions about growth through consumption. This represents opportunity for species maturation if they choose wisdom over continued aggression. The changes weren't limited to distant alien empires. Earth itself was transforming as humanity grappled with their new place in the galaxy. The knowledge that they were protected by impossibly advanced technology left behind by their own evolutionary predecessors changed everything. Some nations wanted to study the installations intensively, hoping to unlock their secrets and gain access to reality-manipulating technology. The installations politely refused, explaining that such knowledge required mental and ethical development that humanity hadn't achieved yet. "Your species shows promise," they told Sarah during one of their communication sessions. But transcendent technology, in the hands of a species still struggling with basic cooperation, would likely result in self-destruction. The creators left specific guidelines about developmental milestones that must be achieved before certain knowledge can be shared. Instead, the installations offered limited technological exchanges, advances in energy production, medical technology, and space travel that would help humanity grow without giving them the power to accidentally destroy themselves. It was frustrating for Earth scientists, but Sarah understood the wisdom behind it. "They're treating us like children," General Harrison complained during one of their briefings. "We just defeated the most powerful empire in the galaxy, and they won't even tell us how they did it." "We didn't defeat anyone," Sarah corrected. "Our babysitters defeated them for us. And maybe that's exactly why we're not ready for their full technology. We're still thinking in terms of military advantage and conquest instead of growth and understanding." The installations had also revealed something else that changed how humanity viewed their future. Earth wasn't the only world with guardian systems. The creators had seeded dozens of planets with similar installations, protecting other developing species across the galaxy. Humanity was part of a vast network of emerging civilizations, all being gently guided toward eventual transcendence. "When your species achieves sufficient development," the installation had explained, "you will be introduced to the other protected species. Eventually, if all goes well, you will join the creators in higher dimensional existence. But that is a process that typically takes millions of years of careful growth." 6 months after the Battle of Sol, Earth had become the center of a new galactic alliance. Species that had been scattered and hiding from the hegemony began establishing permanent diplomatic relations. The installations allowed peaceful alien vessels to establish orbital stations around Earth, creating humanity's first true spaceport. Sarah often stood on the observation deck in the evenings, watching alien ships from a dozen different species dock at the orbital platforms. Crystalline beings, energy-based life forms, and creatures that existed partially in other dimensions worked alongside humans to build something the galaxy hadn't seen in centuries. A civilization based on cooperation rather than conquest. The hegemony still existed, but their expansion had stopped completely. Reports indicated that their hive mind was undergoing what could only be called a philosophical revolution, questioning everything they had believed about their purpose and methods. Some of their ships had even approached Earth's defensive perimeter to request communication. Not for invasion, but for understanding. "They want to know how we achieved such powerful protection," Sarah reported to the World Council. "The installations are willing to talk with them, but only if they agree to suspend all aggressive activities and enter a learning mode." It was the beginning of something unprecedented. The gradual transformation of a galactic empire from conquerors to students. As Sarah watched Earth's first alien sunset, the light of Sol filtered through the crystalline installation, creating colors that human eyes had never seen before. She reflected on how much had changed. Humanity was no longer alone in the universe, no longer vulnerable to extinction, and no longer ignorant of their true heritage. They were the inheritors of transcendent beings, protected by technology that operated beyond physics, and part of a galactic community that was slowly learning to choose growth over destruction. The galaxy was healing, and Earth was at the center of its recovery. In the depths of the ocean installations, ancient AIs continued their eternal watch, monitoring the development of their charges and the slowly changing galaxy around them. Their creators had departed for higher dimensions 50,000 years ago, But their legacy lived on in the protection of emerging consciousness and the gentle guidance toward transcendence. The stars were no longer dying. For the first time in centuries, they were learning to live,